When I got out of my morning shower today, I put some mousse in my hair, and I'm starting to regret that decision because this is doing so many things and none of them are good. I'm getting bored of technology. I remember the first piece of technology that I was really excited for. It was the iPhone 5S. I don't know if anyone remembers the hype around the fingerprint sensor at the time. I was only really young at the time, but it seemed so futuristic and like something we'd never seen before. And I kind of feel like I don't feel that way about phones anymore, you know? We do have innovations like that. We have under-display fingerprint sensors. We have 50 megapixel cameras. We have folding phones. We have things that are kind of revolutionary and groundbreaking, but I don't get excited about them anymore. And I wondered to myself, why am I feeling that way? Why are all of these innovations feeling so much less exciting to me as someone who got so hyped up for this one feature back in 2013? And I think the reason is, when that came out, that was one innovation spaced apart a few years away from other innovations. Whereas now today, you get innovation after innovation after innovation. Every device, every company wants to try something new. And I think I'm getting a little bit bored of that. I'm getting bored of new things, which I didn't even think that was possible. I think in this fast-moving environment, it's really easy for someone who's really into tech to sort of skip past things that maybe were definitely solid and innovative and really cool, but maybe just move past it because it didn't have that same wow factor that maybe something else did, or at least move on from something that they genuinely really loved because they wanted to move on to something with that wow factor again. So I guess that's kind of what this series is about, right? I want to make a few videos on some pieces of technology that I think maybe we skipped over, maybe we didn't give a fair shot to, maybe, are okay to buy again today. And okay, let he who is without sin cast the first stone, right? I have thrown away so many pieces of technology. I have a tech junk drawer just full of things that I haven't used in years. So without further ado, here's episode 1 of Wasted. How does the Pixel 7 Pro fare in 2025? Okay, look, what do you think about when you first pick up a phone, right? Do you think about how fast it is? Do you think about how good the cameras are? No. When you first pick up that phone, the first thing you think of is, wow, this looks really pretty. Hang on. Wow, this looks really pretty. So what do I think about the build of this device? I think that this thing is an absolute brick. It is massive, it is heavy, it is sharp corners, it's beautiful. And I kind of associate sharp corners with power. I think that I'm getting brainwashed by Samsung's Galaxy Ultra line because all of those phones are big, massive square bricks, and they're all really powerful. So I think when I picked this phone up for the first time, I thought, wow, this must have a whole lot of power behind it. And yeah, I acknowledge that this is placebo effects, but if you've been brainwashed in the same way as me, then I don't know, maybe it'll make the phone feel faster for you. Or at least make you feel a little bit more professional while using it, as opposed to the rounded corners of every other phone nowadays. Though that isn't without its downsides. Trends of a few years ago trended towards sort of curved glass on the screen. Basically, it just had a bit of a drop off on the sides. Now that did have its pluses. It made gestures so much more comfortable, and so much more easy to navigate the UI. Pretend I didn't stutter there. But it came with a few downsides, right? So if you're sitting under some harsh light, where the sides start to curve in, you get a weird streak across the side of the phone, which I think looks really bad. And it's kind of distracting if you're trying to read something on the phone and you see that there's some harsh light streaking across your phone. It really annoyed me sometimes. I don't know if that would annoy other people, but it really annoyed me. There's also the issue of cases. Most cases aren't built for phones with curved screens, so there's always a little canyon in between the side of the phone and the side of the phone case, which can get lots of dust, lints. If you're eating, it can be crumbs in between there, and you have to sort of swipe your finger along the side to get it out. That's really awkward. I don't like that at all. And then it's much less durable than a flat screen. If you drop a flat screen on its side, it's going to hit the metal rails on the side of the phone. But if you drop a curved screen on its side, you're going to hit the side of the screen, which is going to crack it. But yeah, okay, I'm not a fan of curved screens, and that's a me thing. If you are a fan of curved screens, then more power to you. Get the phone, you'll probably love it. It's a really good curved screen. It's really comfortable. The gestures feel amazing. It's really good. Though I do think that actually is a big part of how it stacks up in 2025, because the trends at the moment are sort of edging towards very blocky, very, square side rails, fully flat screen. If you look at the Galaxy 24 series, the iPhone 12 and up, the Pixel 9 Pro, everything's sort of flat and blocky, so this definitely makes it feel a little bit dated. But design is entirely up to you. If you like that design and you're okay with it feeling a little bit dated, go ahead. I personally think that my favorite phone design ever was the iPhone 10, and that device looks dated today. So it doesn't really matter how dated your device looks, it just sort of matters how much you enjoy the look. Although, I will hazard one thing, is that one thing that makes it feel dated in a bad way is the back of the device. It's a very glossy black glass, well, black glass if you get the black one. But because it's so glossy, it picks up fingerprints very easily. Also, when the light hits it, it kind of looks grey, which doesn't look as vibrant as maybe something like the Pixel 8 Pro does with the frosted back. Okay, I've just spent enough time talking about the curved screen, so I think I should probably move on to talking about the display, because that feels like the natural progression of the two, right? On one hand, the display is really smooth. It feels really good to scroll and move through the UI and do the gestures and stuff like that. It's 120 Hz, which is just beautiful. I have heard people complain that the UI does get a little bit buggy and the refresh rate starts to slow down a little bit sometimes. I haven't really had this issue, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. I could have just been really lucky. I haven't experienced that issue, but one issue that I've definitely experienced is that the display really isn't that sharp. Even if you push it up to the 1440p setting, which does reduce your battery life a fair bit, even if you put it up to that, I find that the device just isn't as sharp as others. Also, one issue that I have with the display is that I don't think the screen is very vibrant. Now, it's not desaturated by any stretch of the imagination, but I do find that colors just don't pop in the way they probably should. So this device, if you're doing color work, don't use it. That's all I'll say. And then there's also complaints about brightness. And look, it's January right now. If you buy this device, you're not going to have any problems. It's not particularly bright outside. It's quite grey. Making B-roll at the moment is really difficult. But in July, August maybe, when the sun's quite high in the sky, very bright, you're going to struggle with the device a little bit. You only get 927 nits of brightness on this device, which generally day-to-day usage you'll be fine, but again, in summer you're going to struggle with that. I do think you're going to struggle to see the device during like those intense summer days. And look, I think this stuff is important to say, because I do think the display quality is one of those places where the industry has sort of left this device behind and moved on very fast. The industry has sort of been in this weird pitting contest for the best display possible, with moving up things like sharpness and brightness. In fact, you get ridiculously bright devices these days that I'm not even sure is practical. But that is something that you're going to lose out on if you do buy this device in 2025. It's not a bad display by any means, it's just not particularly modern. It really feels like Google was sort of starting out with this device, if that makes sense. Quite simply, it fell short 3 years ago, and it falls short today, which kind of sucks. Now look, I know what everyone's here for, okay? If you're buying a Pixel phone, there's a good chance you're buying it for the camera. Alright, these things produce some of the best stills photography known to the phone world, and that's just sort of not debatable. I actually think the Pixel 7 Pro might do this better than modern models. It's very bright, very saturated, very colourful, and I think modern devices go for a more realistic look, which, depending on your taste, you might not like it, but I really do. I think saturation and colour, I love it a lot, and I'll show you some examples up on screen right now. It's very difficult to take what I consider to be a bad photo on this device, but it's not impossible. This phone uses computational photography to take photos. Basically, when you take a photo, AI will take a look at it and say, this photo would be better if it had this bumped up, or it had this level of sharpness, or it had this level of ISO, or anything like that. And that can cause you problems, because AI can get it wrong. Quite frequently, in fact, AI can get it wrong. But especially one that it struggles with is exposing properly. So for example, there's one time I went into a store and took a photo of what I thought was a really cool can, and it sort of underexposed the image for no reason. It was a very bright store, but then bumped up the brightness in post, which was really awkward to see. And it made the photo just look like a splotchy, grainy mess because it was trying to bring out data that just sort of wasn't there. And it made what could have been just like, oh, a cute photo of a cute little can, and just made it really ugly. She keeps interrupting my shoot. What do you have to say? She had nothing to say. But on the good side of that, actually, is that most companies that do computational photography kind of haven't improved that. You kind of can't. AI sort of does what it does from time to time. But that means that on the computational photography end, this device actually doesn't look as dated as it does in certain other areas. So if you're buying this specifically for the camera, you're really not missing out on as much as you'd think. So I actually stopped taking my DSLR out in public because this phone took photos that just looked better than I could on there. So why aren't I shooting this video on the Pixel 7 Pro? It's because the video is really, really bad. I'm going to get really technical for a second, and I want you to follow me because it is kind of important to understanding Android a little bit. I'm gonna read from my script because I think this is important. Android video has never been particularly great. Phone sensors are quite small. They don't let in a huge amount of light, which means that more ISO, or digital exposure, is needed. The problem with ISO is that it brings a lot of digital noise, which in video is very noticeable. There is of course a lot more to ISO and noise, but this is a brief summary. Now, devices like the iPhone are able to deal with this much better because they built their cameras, software and processors together to make sure they work well, but Android phones use pieces from a few different companies, so they aren't all built together quite as efficiently as Apple does. Now, that's actually different for the Pixel 7 Pro, as it uses Google's own Tensor chip and their own camera software, but this is only the second generation of Tensor, so they're still trying to get it right at this point. As of 2025, this is significantly better. The video on 2025 phones is much more clean, sharp and detailed, but if you don't shoot a lot of video on your phone, this probably won't affect you day to day. And in fairness, if video is very important to you, this phone might actually be a good option too, because this phone is cheap enough at the moment that you can buy it and then also buy something like a Sony ZV line that will do the video for you. Okay, let's do two in one, alright? Something the Pixel struggles with and something the Pixel excels at. Performance and software. If you're familiar with post-Android 12 Android, then you know it's a pretty stable software and you're not really going to have many problems with it. And the story of Android 15 is no worse, in fact it's significantly better. Android 15 runs amazingly on this device and it's very smooth, very easy to use, and it's very enjoyable to use as well. In fact, in terms of software, this device actually just got a huge upgrade. It's been announced this phone will be supported up until Android 17 rather than the slated Android 15 that was originally given. Now this is great for a number of reasons, but I think the biggest one is when I'm buying a second-hand device, my first thought is, right, how many more years will I be able to use this phone? And the answer here is 2 more years, which is most people's upgrade cycle anyway, so that's good for me. So, performance. That's a place where Pixel generally struggles, and I fully understand if you're skeptical as to the performance of this device. Now, the Tensor G2 really isn't as powerful as something like a Snapdragon or one of Apple's Bionic chips, but I'm not really going to complain that much about them. Day to day, you're really not going to struggle in any way. It just feels fine in general. Gaming, however, is something that you might want to rethink using this device for. You can play something like Bloons or Subway Surfers pretty easily, but if you want to move over something like Genshin or Warzone, use something else. Use anything else. Please use not this. One of the reasons that you wouldn't use it for gaming is that this phone kind of has an issue with thermals. It gets really hot over really nothing. You could be browsing Twitter and it'll start heating up. Now you could overtake this as a downside and say that the phone gets really hot and slow, or you can be an optimist and you can say that it's a free heater during the cost of living crisis. Battery was not great in 2022, and in 2024, 2025-ish, I found that I really wasn't getting a full day out of this thing. In fact, this is one of the major reasons I upgraded a couple of years back. It's just not good enough. I was routinely getting maybe 4 hours of screen on time. And hey, if you don't use your phone a lot during the day, you just use it to respond to text, do a quick Google search, take a quick photo, you might not have this issue. In fact, you might be okay putting it on the battery saver mode. But I work in a very high-paced environment, I need to be texting my colleagues and stuff like that, and I also like going on social media while I'm on the bus and stuff like that. So I definitely really struggled with the low battery life on this thing. But as I said, you can absolutely use it on battery saver mode. I put it on that during quite a long day out in London, and I got maybe close to 9 hours of screen on time on this device because I was using my phone to navigate London, take photos, all those kind of things. And I really didn't have an issue while I was on battery saver mode. But that sort of negates the smooth UI thing because it reduces the 120Hz refresh rate down to 60, which on phones these days feels very choppy. Look, this battery was probably fine, probably fairly industry standard in 2022, but in 2025 I really can't justify paying much money for it. And that's kind of the stickler. But hey, if you've got a power bank and a lot of patience, the price is really good. I wrote a whole outro, so you better like this. So, does the Pixel 7 Pro hold up in 2025? Well, it's a mixed bag. All here so it doesn't look like I'm looking at a script. The camera is still fantastic. Arguably it's better than some of its newer siblings. The build quality, while not the most modern, still feels solid and premium, especially considering the price drop, and the performance, while not being the absolute fastest, is perfectly usable for most tasks. You're also getting more support than a lot of devices of this era. However, the battery life is a major concern, especially for heavier users. The display, while smooth, isn't the sharpest or most vibrant by today's standards, and the overall package just feels a little bit dated compared to the newer, more powerful flagships. Ultimately, the Pixel 7 Pro in 2025 is a fantastic value proposition for someone who wants a great camera in a solid package without breaking the bank, but it's not without its compromises. If you prioritize battery life, the latest performance, or a cutting-edge display, you might be better off looking elsewhere.